Good afternoon. Yeah. That's also a lesson, to say good morning and good afternoon. I wasn't told this when I was in Yeshiva. Everything was business as usual, matter of fact. Okay, so it's an interesting way he introduced me about meaning. I understand I run the Meaningful Life Center and all that. But to be honest, meaning is just a code word for Teira Meloshen Hera, the most common expression in all of the Rebbes Sichos over all the years, and I looked into it, is Teira Meloshen Hera. Maisa Iker is second, but Teira Meloshen Hera, sometimes the same Farbrengen, and the Rebbe would always say, Hera B'chaim, a lesson in life. And there wasn't an iota or a word or a letter or a nuance in Teira that was outside of that framework of not being a direction and some directive to our lives. And I begin with that because I think as mechanchim, as educators, and being someone who's also been on the other end of it, receiving an education, whatever that meant, that would mean. So I'm pretty much familiar with, I would say, the negative sides of it, and hopefully together we can create the proper revolution that the Rabbeim wanted in what true chinuch is. So that's what I'll be talking about, which is of course all based on the Rebbe and the Rabbeim, Chassidus itself. And the big question, I think the Klotz Kasha may be always good to start with a question, is how is a education in a Chassidish Chabad school different than any other good Jewish frum yeshiva? And how should it be different? Now, obviously, there's a lot of things in common. You know, you're teaching certain skills and certain amount of knowledge. But still, if the Rabbeim came to contribute with Chassidus, obviously, above all, it begins with the education of our children and then, of course, as adults. So how would we quantify what that Chiddush, what is the contribution? So, you usually hear things like Chassidus adds Primius and Chayis and so on, which is all true. But beyond that, it's I believe, never been turned into a methodology that you can really turn to and almost like a guidebook, like when you see in all the curricula of Nigla, or not just Nigla. When I include Nigla, I don't just mean Gemara, I mean even Chumash or Tanakh or history or Halacha. There's a lot has been developed, some better than others, but there is a lot out there because there's a lot of schools, and over the years it's been developed. But I have not seen, at least from my experience, that someone has done the same thing with Chassidus. When I say Chassidus, I don't just mean Chassidus and how to learn Chassidus, I also mean how Chassidus contributes, how to learn Nigla, and how to learn Chumash, and how to learn everything you want to communicate to a bocher. For that matter, this applies also, of course, to the girls' schools, but I think you're all mechanchim in boys' schools. Am I correct? Just want to make sure. Okay. So I will sum it up as I understand it, and I want to just give one or two introductions, besides what I've said till now. And that is, to me, it's very obvious, even though I know this has been a debate, and some people still find it controversial, which I always find quite perplexing, and that is, can you really make Chassidus relevant? Isn't that some type of like pseudo modern new age approach to things? If you use the word psychology, that's like almost puzzle, because it sounds like a goyish word. So when you try to make Tanya or any other part of Chassidus relevant and personally relevant, trust me, I've gotten plenty of pushback in my attempt at doing so. Much less now than it was years ago, but it still exists because there's, I believe, a complete distortion among even our most Chassidish Yidden. I've had mashpiyim tell me, and I kid you not when I say this, you think you're going to make Tanya relevant? I've heard this. People have told this to me. I said, so what do we learn it for? Tanya Kadisha, to mezachech ha'avir, to refine the environment, to understand what the standards are. It's a kedusha, heilig ha'esis, basically. Like the Rebbe once said, one of the Alter Chassidim used to say, heilig ha'esis can ein Wort nicht verstanden. It's so holy, we don't understand it. And I said, are you kidding me? You're a mashpia? I think you should go out of this business. You don't even believe in your own product. You should sell shoes or pizza, I don't know, something that you believe in. So I said, so who is it for? He says, maybe the Alter Rebbe's Chassidim. And he was talking to me openly. I could imagine how many people won't say it, but they feel that way. I said, you mean for you? Like the Tzemach Tzedek was once at a table, and someone was, the Tzemach Tzedek was speaking about, the Frierdiker Rebbe brings it in the Sichos, was speaking about the Chiddush of Tanya, and there was some like Velta Shehid, I guess cynical, and he says, what's a Tanya Shenuv Gitan? What did Tanya already contribute? And Tzemach Tzedek heard him say it, so he turned to him and said, did you ever learn Tanya? So he said, no. He says, Indira Testaka Garnish Dov Gitan. And you, Ataka, didn't contribute anything. You never learned it. So I would say the same thing to those that feel that way. Maybe even if they read it, doesn't mean they learned it. So to me, it's appalling to hear that, because I say to myself, simple rule, that Rabbeim, starting from the Alter Rebbe, Mittler Rebbe, Tzemach Tzedek, Rebbe Marash, Rebbe Rashab, Frierdiker Rebbe, and the Rebbe, spent how many hours teaching and writing Chassidus? You can't even imagine how many hours. Most of the time, that's what they did. You just see it from the sheer volume of how much they produced. So let me ask you something. If they found it necessary that most of their time should be invested in doing that, and not in taking Yeshivas and answering personal questions, they did that too, but it was not comparable to the amount of time that they invested. That means they personally chose and realized that the best contribution they can make in the time spent and invested is to leave us a doctrine called Chassidus, and that would be the best way that they can serve as Rabbeim to us. To me, this is like, doesn't even need explanation. But I'm stating it for the record because I believe that when you take that attitude and you look at the Rabbeim putting so much keiches and sweat and blood and tears and whatever you want to call it, anon nafshik sovis Yehovahs, that's what we have of them, then that is a living Torah that they felt this is the way to best contribute to what Chassidus contributes to Yiddishkeit, and if they thought it was something else, they would have done something else, and that's what they did. So if imreku mikemhu, if we can't find an answer there, or we can't find direction, then it's our issue. The Alter Rebbe basically says that. Nagdomet Tanya, what does he say? That there's the Eitzes l'kol inyon avedus Hashem, and if you can't find an answer, go to the Gdelim Shebeir. Now, why do you have to add that second part? Because he meant it seriously. He meant if you can't find the answer, go find to someone who could find it. Gdelim Shebeir. I'll talk about that a little later more, what the expression means. But by me, this is an axiom, a muskulition, that Chassidus is absolutely not optional, but necessary and relevant and in every aspect of our lives. And above all, begins with children from the youngest age, not just mid-school, not even young school, from the beginning, as early as even if they come out of their mother's womb. That Chassidus has direction and guidance of how to be the best possible Id, and the best Eved Hashem, and the best possible human being, and the best way to be a healthy, solid, wholesome human being as you grow into an adult. Now, if anybody has a disagreement with that axiom, I think it should be a different discussion. It's not for now, because I'm going with that given. I assume you all agree with that. I'm not even going to go for a vote, because it's not up for election. This is, I believe, beyond any shilas. But the reason I say it, because when you state your muskulition, it makes it a lot easier to then talk about, okay, based on that, so then the question is not whether Chassidus can teach us how Chassidus teaches us. It's not if, but how. And here is where, thank God, I had the schus for many years, obviously, to write and work on the Sichos of the Rebbe, which of course really means not just the Rebbe, but Kol HaTeira Kula through the lens of the Rebbe, and of course Kol HaChassidus. And then, after Gimel Tammuz, after Chav Zayin Adar, really, being out of that job, so to speak, I had to find, repurpose my mission. So what I basically doing, exactly what I did then, except not in Yiddish or in Hebrew, but taking the Rebbe's ideas, again, all Kol HaTeira and Chassidus, and try to distill it in a language that is accessible and relevant to people who may not know the original. So where I'm coming from is that experience. Many of you know me, either directly or indirectly. So just stating that as well, where I'm taking what I'm taking from. So I want to just, I think a good way to capture, I'm going to take up 5 key points. And this comes as a maskana, so to speak, like a sikum, tamsis, of what I, and not by no means is it limited or is it definitive, a tamsis of what I believe are the 5 methodologies and 5 principles that I would say that Chassidus gives us in kol hachinuch kulei, and to answer the question that I posed earlier, which is, what do we have to contribute that another yeshiva, another school does not have? And of course, a lot of this is based somewhat, at least, on Kuntres Eitz HaChaim, because the Rebbe Rashab himself wrote a whole mission statement in Kuntres Eitz HaChaim, why he's establishing yeshiva. He clearly felt the need to do that. We know that the Rebbe Rashab said it's a Gevalgid Senyor, or whatever the amount of years before he decided, because this wasn't a small matter. The Alter Rebbe, through the Rebbe Marash, did not establish a yeshiva. And the Chabad Bochrim went to other yeshivas. And here he felt the need to do so. And we know what he says there. He says that you don't need a yeshiva for more limudat Torah, that you have any good yeshivas. He wanted to establish soldiers in the Kol Yetzel Mechames Beis David. That's not the Lashon Kuntres Eitz HaChaim. That's in the famous Sikha, Tofrei Samach Aleph. But above all, he wanted to train Eden to be proud Jews that would be able to be, and I'll just use my own language, to be on the offense. So I call the word soldiers that would go out and fight the wars that would have to be fought with the dark times that were coming. Which was in a way a nevuah. The nevuah of Charfikus Meshichecha, Charfu Elakim, El Hashem. As I said, that's a loshon from that sikha, but combined with Kuntres Eitz HaChaim, he explains what he wants. And it is embodiment, a personification of Chassidus and a yeshiva system. So here are the 5 points, and I'm going to elaborate on each one of them. I'll obviously leave time for questions, and we can talk more about it. But these are the 5 that I have summed up, that I feel comes, and here's how it goes. Number 1, that the key thing in chinuch, in the Torah chinuch, which of course includes not just Torah per se, but the holistic approach to chinuch, is methodology versus data. Actually, I have it written now. Why do I have to go by memory? Let me just make sure that it's consistent with what I wrote. Makes it easier, okay? So methodology versus facts, or character development versus data, or another way of putting it, empowerment versus information. When I went to yeshiva, it was mostly about information and data and knowledge. And frankly, for me personally, and I'm only one person, it was not exciting, it was not stimulating. It was facts. And sometimes you were interested in the facts, and sometimes you weren't interested. Just to give you an example, recently I spoke to someone, and I asked him, so, what did you learn? He says, I learned Islamites Melachas and Esses Fides, all in one sentence. It's numbers. It's a structure, and then you know what they are. We all learn what they are exactly. We all know the difference between the Rebbe's expression, Vehimidu Talmidim Harbe, or Shetehei Shalheves Elime Eleha. I'm using the Lashenis Chazal the Rebbe uses very often. That the goal is not to, and I'm not going to go through the whole Torah behind it, just the maskana, that the goal is not just to light a flame, which is chinuch, but to make sure that the candle that you're lighting, the student in this context, or child, is a flame that rises on his or her own, which... He says that Loshen? Okay, yeah. Yeah, I don't remember the Loshen, but if that's consistent with this, it's possible, yeah, great. And Himidu Talmidim Harbe, Himidu. Amida, what's Hamidu? It should be V'yilmudu Talmidim Harbe. Himidu, they should stand on their own feet, which simply puts a very easy Even HaBeichen. If a student constantly needs their teacher or someone else to answer all their questions, you've not been successful. Now, we'll always need a mashpiyim and Yeshivas and rabbanim v'chulu. But to someone who cannot resolve an issue on their own, you've not taught them real skills. You've given them information, and you may have given them a lot of answers, but you've not given them the empowerment necessary that they could find answers. And this is across the board. This isn't just about learning Chassidus. This is about learning anything. That empowerment is a whole different story, that methodology. That's number 1. Number 2 is a big picture, giving the big picture of what God wants of us, the big picture of everything, and that informs the small picture. This is, of course, a critical one. There are many, many people that you can go to, and they'll tell you every Sugi and Gemara, they can be Bekim and Shas, but they can't tell you what the big picture is, why God created us. And this is a true story that I heard from Shlomo Tachtel, who comes to the class I give every morning in Ayin Beis. It was Tavshin Chavov. He was learning in the Yeshiva of Iluyim of Brisk. I forgot what the name of the yeshiva was. It was in Yerushalayim. He was there. A Briski yeshiva for Iluyim. One day, a guy, an American student, wanders in. He said, with a big head of red hair, like this, and he comes in and he speaks English. There was one or two that spoke a little English there. And what can we do to help you? Obviously, they didn't feel he belongs. He's not going to be enrolled in the Iluyim of Brisk. So he says he's looking, since this is Yerushalayim, he come from America. He's looking if someone can help him understand what God is, who God is, the Jewish God. They all looked at each other like, yeah, it's a good question. Nobody could answer. Like he had asked them a sugi about Chetzi Shir or some other intricate thing, they would go on for hours. He simply asked them if anybody can tell him a little about God. I've heard this from Rabbi Tachtel, you can check with him. And they all got very intrigued. So someone says, he thinks there's a Eid called Rab Osher Lemel Cohen in Meir Sha'arim that may know. You hear? All of Yerushalayim. Maybe there's one Jew that can talk about God. I know it sounds almost like insane. Okay, so they all march. The guy with the red hair, Rabbi Tachtel, the son of the Rosh Yeshiva of Brisk of there, 5, 6 guys who were all intrigued to hear. They all went. They went to the middle of the afternoon. They thought it would be a 10, 15-minute conversation. Inviting. They arrive. They find him. He's sitting in one of the shtiblach there, or he was in Teresemis. I'm not sure where he was. And they ask him, and he spoke in Hebrew or Yiddish, and someone translated because he didn't speak English either. And he didn't. It wasn't 10 minutes. It wasn't 15 minutes. It was 5 hours. God. Now, anyone that learned Chassidus has a lot to say about God. And they were like so amazed. Besides what he said, that Aid can speak about God for 5 hours, they were like shocked. That's a perfect example, the small picture and not having a clue of the big picture. Now, the Gemara says, if you don't have that, you forget the Nesan HaTeira, at the end it will be Teira Azev. So that's point number 2. Just for the record, if you want to know what happened afterwards, 3 of those, all of the Bochim wanted to know more, so they asked Rabbi Shalem, well, where could they learn more about this? And is he the only Jew on earth that knows about God? So he said, go to Kfar Chabad and learn some Tanya, and you'll start to know. Anyway, they came back, and when the Rosh Yeshiva heard that, he forbade them. No shiurim, nothing. 2, 3, Tachtel, I think, and who else left then? Yeah, from Be'er Sheva, what's his name? Cheskel Sefer also was there. He also left. They went to Kfar Chabad, and the condition was they can't come back. The Rosh Yeshiva's son wanted to go, but obviously his father didn't let him. The other 2 guys, I'm not sure what happened. So the same yeshiva later that Ezra Shachat went to, and I think Rabbi Heller even, I don't know the exact dates when everybody was there, but this was it. Perfect example. Number 3, to address issues at their root versus symptoms. The Axioms of the Rebbe, you can talk about, when you talk about refuas, you can talk about refuas hacheli, which includes cheli hanefesh obviously as well, that addresses the problem, like a Band-Aid or a painkiller or aspirin or Tylenol, Advil. Or you can address the root, the Sheidish HaDvarim. And you'll see in all the Rebbe's advice, and so much, not just the Rebbe, all the Rabbeim, they never just address a symptom, always cutting to the chase of what is the root. Now obviously short term you may need to address a symptom. So that's number 3. Or another AC is the Rebbe uses this expression, preventive medicine versus remedial medicine. So they do the right things, so you don't need to then have to deal with every issue. Number 4 is relevance. I'll elaborate on that in a moment. And number 5, maybe the most important of all, empathy, what we call emotional intelligence and emotional health, a healthy emotional person. That's not just about ideas and concepts and cerebral in the brain, but it's personal. The Rebbe's Ace is Dvarim HaYetzim Min HaLev Nechnosim Al HaLev, Ki Yetzer B'Zeh, similar to that. So I'm going to elaborate a bit on this. And to me, I'm going to be very practical. I'm not going to talk about abstractly. There's a lot behind everything, obviously, and we could spend the time discussing all the sources for all of this. But I'd rather talk about the so-called maskonas that we take away, that practical. You're all busy people. You're mechanchim in one way or another. You want to know how to apply it. So I want to begin with the relevance. Well, actually, I can go in any order. I'll just go in whatever order. I had the ability to write to the Rebbe, ask Shilas. So I asked the Rebbe once whether you can translate. I was teaching Beis Rivka then, 12th graders, whether you can translate ki karev elecha, the word karev, as relevant. And the Rebbe checked, yes. Because usually karev people translate it as close. Karev elecha, the thing is close to you, not rachik. Not reid cheke, le mever layam, le bashamayim. Karev, close. But what does close mean? That you sit close to Anor and Kedesh, so you're close to the Torah. You could be right near a Tefa Torah and not be at all connected to it. So I just wanted to have that issue, that the word relevant works. And the Rebbe made a check. Nothing else. He didn't explain. I didn't. So why am I saying it? Because it has once you have a check from the Rebbe, Now, why is that so vital? Because if you don't translate Karev Elecha properly, or it remains in an abstract way, then the whole Tanya in a way falls. Because the Alter Rebbe didn't come to Mechadish, he said, Eichu Karev made. Moshe Rabbeinu told the Eden in Sefer Dvarim, Parshat Nitzavim, that you should know that the Torah mitzvahs, or tshuva, whatever, it's Torah mitzvahs, let's call it that, is not in heaven and not across the White Sea and not distant, but Karev to you. The Alter Rebbe comes and explains, Eichu Karev Elecha Dover made. So if you don't translate Karev, then the whole Tanya, you don't really know what is Alter Rebbe coming to explain. More importantly, what's missing in the Pasuk that Moshe said that the Alter Rebbe had to write a whole sefer to explain that. That's why I found it so important, because Alter Rebbe himself is writing the Sharblat. So when you say relevant, it changes the whole equation in many ways. And it also forces us then, that means that every line in Tanya, and from Tanya you can extend it to all of Chassidus, Teresh B'Ksav of Chassidus is Karev Elecha Dover Me'ed B'Ficha B'Vov Chala Seisei. Relevant. So then, once you know that it has to be relevant, that any Pedic, even Pedic Yud, that talks about the Tzaddik and the Tzaddik Gomor, you could say, okay, that's an introduction to the Beinani or to the Rosh and the Beinani. No, everything is a Hira. Everything is relevant. And just to add to the point, I don't know if you saw this Yeshivas that the grandson of Rab Dovid Raskin recently was Mefarsin, a Hagah from the Rebbe, Tammuz Tovshin Yud. Did any of you see the Yeshivas? It's a mugi by the Rebbe. It's online. So he asked the Rebbe a few things, but I'm just going to mention two things. He asked the Rebbe, what happens when you learn Chassidus and you don't feel it has an impact on you? And the second question he asked is how you're supposed to learn a Maimer. And regarding the first question, the Rebbe gave his own mashal. I never heard it before. He said, if you look Chassidus, it doesn't have an impact. It means it's like someone walking in the street on a sunny day and his eyes are closed. That doesn't mean it doesn't have an impact. It means you're not feeling the impact. But it's definitely having an impact. It's the Rebbe's mashal. The second thing the Rebbe said about how to learn, the Rebbe said every Pedic or Sif or Vamaimer, the one who's learning it has to ask, what's the Hira to me, the Bechein? And not just the Bechein that the Maimer says. Not all Maimorim have a Bechein, but even if it says. And the Rebbe gave an example. They were talking about a Maimer. I forgot which Maimer. I think a Tovshin Maimer. That when you learn, let's say in Chassidus, it talks about the Ilui of Limud HaTorah. Shashuim Lefonov, Chachmasha Shel Kodesh Baruch Hu, Torah. Reise V'Kudshe Bricha Kul Echad. So right away you have to ask yourself, what's the Bechein? The Bechein is that tomorrow morning, I'm going to either start a new shir in Torah, or I'm going to learn Torah with a new type of chayas, based on what I just learned. And the Rebbe gives a mashal. He says, these words, he says, when you want to pierce a hole in a beged, you can't use your hand or a big finger, you have to use a very thin needle. And the Rebbe says this, the Maimer itself, the Teichen of the Maimer and the Askol of the Maimer is like the hand. It's the Teichen, it's the meat of the issue. I'm just explaining, the Rebbe doesn't say those words. The needle is the Bechein. A Bechein is not the ganze Askol, it's not the whole Arum. But the Bechein pierces. When you bring it into an action, in this case, learning Torah more chayas or kamas beichus, that's the needle. I'm saying it because Mamash I'm working from the Rebbe, that it's not just in general everything is Hera, that mamish taking Chassidus, everything should be applied immediately.
That's a very easy example.
Huh?
It's a very easy example in that minor.
Yeah.
Sometimes
Of course, it is sof lifnei tzimtzum, for example, right? Okay, we'll talk about that too. I will. But as I said, the first most important thing, there are people who feel that it is sof lifnei tzimtzum doesn't have to be relevant. That's why I'm making a case for its relevance. If it doesn't have to be relevant, then we're not bothered with the problems. Then you don't need to struggle with it. Then you just can rely on, the haskalos of it. I will get to that. I just wanted to go over some of the 5 points, and then I'm going to give some. Huh? Yeah, absolutely. Exactly. When you say Hashem Echad, you could have his bonus of Achdus Hashem, and there's no pirud, and etc., etc. But then the question is that Achdus connected to you. You yourself, where's your Achdus? Well, the Havana is not a Bechein, because the Havana is just simply you understand better Achdus Hashem. You can go back a second later and be a person that's completely inconsistent between your behavior, let's say, and your scholars. That's why the Bechein is so vital. Because the Bechein pierces. Without the Bechein, without the Teda Melashon Heira. Look, Teda Melashon Heira, it's like the guy told me, a young guy came to me for advice. He didn't like what I told him. So he says to me, I said to him, Ein Chacham Kabal Nesayin. I happen to have Nesayin in this area. So he says, I learned that Maimer Chazal, and I also now have Nesayin, because I learned it, he thinks he has Nesayin. No, that means you know that Nesayin is good. The Bechein, there's 2 levels of a Bechein. There's knowing a Bechein, and then there's doing it. It's very different. The Afasisiv is a big one. In other words, if someone goes away from Tanya, a lot of people know Tanya very well, and they even know some of the directives. Tanya says, Me'ech Shal Taleh, for example. That B'chol Eis, a person has the power any time to suppress the taivas of his nefesh habamis, and machshava, dibur, and maisa. It says it clear in Tanya. And everybody knows it. Now tell me, the next question is, how many people do it? And they'll say, what do I do b'peil when I have a taiva? It's a nice thought. The Alter Rebbe says it's natural. The question is, tell me how to do it. And that's where we get stuck in most cases. So I'm talking about that level of Bechein, not just the concept of a Bechein and even what the Bechein is.
With some of the more esoteric idionim, if that's all right, that we could apply, and the opposite of many abstract areas is to be manfish that abstract.
For sure, but I will say even the things that are not abstract is also a leap between understanding it well and acting on it, I'm going to talk about some examples. I just wanted to go through these 5 things a little more in detail, because here's what I just take it in a way like an overarching point about all 5. What do you want when you are, I'm not sure what level mechanchim you are, whether you teach a class or your principals or you control many classes. It really doesn't matter what I'm going to say. I would ask one simple objective. What would you see as a dream student come out of your institution? What would you consider to be, this is something that I'm proud of, this is something we invested in, and you know what? What we invested in, this is what the objective. Every business person asks that question, obviously, lahavdil, because you have to know what's the result. Now, I'll be very honest, I think a lot of mechanachim don't even have an answer to that. They'll say words like, we know the prerequisite things. A Yiras Shamayim, a Chosid, a Lamd, Chayil. We all, of course, that I got. But let's be more specific. And what are you doing in that to contribute to that, to make sure that will happen? And we all know there's no guarantees. We're not talking about guarantees. We're talking about as much as we can do b'derech hateva to get that result. So I would go even more bluntly. To me, and I said it, I was in Australia a few weeks ago, at Gimel Tammuz, and I met with the board there. They're going through their own learning curve and growing pains. And I asked that question. I said, if you go to an Ivy, an excellent private school, Goyish school in the United States or anywhere, they'll tell you what their objective is. Very straightforward. To make sure the students are capable of going to Ivy League colleges to get the top jobs in the country, whether it's in business or in medicine or in law or in computers or whatever it may be. That's a very clear objective. And now we have to teach them these skills to get there. So what's our equivalent response? And it cannot be just platitudes and broad strokes. It has to be practical in that same way. So I would put it this way, and it's not by no means the only way to say it, but this comes from the Rebbe, that to have Jews that grow up to be passionate, proactive, Jews that are take upon themselves the responsibility to some way bring the Mashiach, if you wish, or to bring light to the world, or to not just take care of themselves and be frum Hashem Ritei mitzvahs, but to be mashpia in some way. Be'esis acheris, a shliach. Now, shliach, I mean in the broad sense of the word. I don't mean necessarily in any bureaucratic or political way. I mean shliach Hashem. He knows my neshama came down to earth for one reason, to use my skills to make a dira b'tachtein in my corner of the world. And that is the overarching mission. Everything else is toffel to that. If I had a school and students come out with that, I'm not saying it's, again, no guarantees, but that's the objective. It's a very clear objective, and there's an Evan Abechen. Remember, all success has to have a test. You can't just say everybody's a good person out there. Obviously, we as Chabad believe everyone has a neshama and all that. But then they don't need your school to teach to have that. We don't give them their neshama. We're talking about actualizing that neshama. Now, why am I saying it? Because I think these 5 things I mentioned, again, no way definitive. It's you can always add, you can always replace, whatever. But I think these 5, if you do it, that's what you'll have. That will be the end result. Just so to sum it up again, you empower someone. You don't empower someone, you give them a lot of information. You'll have a brisker Talmud who may be a Boki B'Shas and may be an excellent guy. He may even be a tremendous Yiddush Shamayim and Shemer Torah mitzvahs, but he's not going to be a mashpia outside of his own little circle. Empowerment means that you're empowering the person to use his skills. So that, for example, what would be the example? Even though this is not an example, I think you can implement the yeshivas, but it's a good lesson that I heard from Eli Lipsker of Asholem. It's going around. So he was here in Tafshech Beis or something. He came from Israel. Kfutza. The yeshiva then, of course, was a much smaller yeshiva. It wasn't like an open world in which we live now. So the Hira is even more relevant. So he went secretly and started taking music lessons. He later became a musician. And the school yeshiva found out about it. And they were going to throw him out. Or send him back to Israel. He didn't come here from America to learn music lessons. Those days, they told the Rebbe everything. Not to suggest they don't tell him everything today. I'm just saying, they told him these details. So the Rebbe said, why would you throw him out? Adrabah, find out who's paying. He probably doesn't have money, so the yeshiva should pay for the lessons. Or I'm not exactly Lashon. Nachas in the Welt for Chassidische music, or something like that. He will make an impact with Chassidische music. Now this, of course, and then what happened was I heard from him that one day David Askim calls him in, and he says, I hear you're taking music lessons, so he's ready to get the axe, to get a ticket back home. He says, Vetzolt. So he says, he has no money. He took some alvos. He'll pay back. So the yeshivas get zoln, and that was that. He was shocked. Later he found out it was from the Rebbe. Now, this, of course, did not mean that the Rebbe said, in 7-7, you should open up a music department. That's obviously not the point. The point is the Rebbe saw a person who has a passion, mokim shali bechafetz. And if you harness it, again, this wasn't a license that now everyone who wants to learn music, instead of learning Chassidus and Nigla, go take music. It's a lesson just that you want to empower somebody. So if you see a Talmud that is, let's say, weak, some people just simply can't sit. I have family members like this. They just don't have zizflesh. They're very eccentric, they're very creative and very talented. So you're not going to take them out of school and put them by a piano. But if you're healthy parents, and I saw this with my own eyes, how one child was destroyed because parents just could not tolerate that the child should be different. And other parents brought him a piano. They told him to go to yeshiva, but they never made him crazy to succeed and excel, because it would be like forcing a round peg in a square hole. You would have destroyed him. So what does that mean? It doesn't mean officially. It means as a sensitive mashpia or a sensitive machanech, you have to be aware when you see something. I'm talking obviously an extreme case, but you have to be aware of these things, because your goal is shaping a person's life. Your goal is not just to download and stuff him up with knowledge. You're talking about shaping a person's life, that he should be a productive id, that he can do what the Rebbe wants him to accomplish with his life. Now, you have to have discretion, and again, you can't suddenly say, you know what, anyone who's a little weak, let's create a new curriculum. It's not so simple. We all know that. But you have to be aware of that, and it's critical, because you could destroy a life if you try to force the person into a mold that doesn't work. But on a more subtle level, someone we're talking about, most Talmidim are people who can go with the mainstream, and they do go to classes, but I mean, this again is resources. We know we have limited resources, unlimited budgets, and so on. But a true machanech, a true mashpia, a true teacher should be able to know whose class. And when you talk to someone and you see if everyone is a little different, how can you arouse in that person a chayis in what they're learning? I'm going to take myself as an example. I was bored to death in my classes. I got away with it because I had a good head. So I was able to not fail completely. So I got a 66 instead of a 64, if it was numbered. And I was bored. It was not exciting. It wasn't relevant to me. It was very... Now, I'm just me. And there were one day I learned, one day I didn't learn. You know how this thing goes. I remember, the only thing I remember that I could speak about very positively, because I also no one ever spoke about something that I found relevant in a real personal way. Even like a mensch, if you get angry, what do you do? Bullying, being nice, clean. The only one, Rabbi Ushpal, I remember, Ad Hayem. He used to talk about I remember one talk he gave us about being clean. You have to be clean. And he had a very edle sprach. I remember him saying, the negel, darf allemal sein rein. You have to always be clean. So afterwards I went over to him and I said, why do we have to be clean? So I remember he held my hand. Today, I know you can't do that. And he said to me, because we're mamleches keinim v'gei kodesh. And so from mamleches keinim v'gei kodesh, darf sein rein. Shame. Now, why did this leave an impact on me? It doesn't even sound so revolutionary. I mean, any normal person should say that, because no one ever said it. And I'm not trying to use this as this is the kavanah. Just trying to say it was something that spoke to me. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Mamleches keinim v'gei kodesh, a shena posuk, and we talk about it in all kinds of ways. And it comes down to simple kiddush Hashem. Comes down to how you present, how you project. People see you, how you behave. Now you'll say, is this Tifach Chassidus? Well, I'll tell you this. Chassidus is meant to create mention, not just create people who have a lot of ideas as well. So that's why whether it's empowerment is so vital, because it's empowering. This empowered me. It made me feel special. It made me feel I want to live up to that. Because and it didn't take much. What did he already say? It wasn't even a ganze meis. Now he could have done it easily through maybe a heirah in a class, learning something, let's say that posuk or other psukim, and say, what's the heirah from it, etc. Now I just want to add something. Some people say, one second, for thousands of years we've been learning Torah, and Lav Dafka was always mentioned these things. So I have to point out, you have to remember, when we lived in a shtetl, or you lived in the time of Moshe Rabbeinu, the environment was so holy that you just picked up certain things by osmosis just from the smell of the chicken soup in your grandmother's kitchen. Today, daf miyah is taichin. And that's a big part of what Chassidus is. Why was Chassidus not in his gala 1,000 years ago? Because some things didn't have to be spoken. Now we have to speak even the unspoken rules. So things like that. I mean, we had in my class, I remember there was one guy who had a stutter. People would make fun of him. I probably also did. And not once did I ever hear from an adult said something like, a little edelkeit, a guy like him, you should have a little more sensitivity. I mean, to me, these things left a big impression. They left like, what this Torah we're learning is disconnected from reality, to be very honest. That's maybe why I'm so passionate about that. We have to make that reconnection. But it's not my own thing, as I said, Torah Melashon Hira. So go to the next thing. The big picture informs the small picture. You're not going to have a student that's going to come out and be a proactive Jew, a shliach, using those words, if he doesn't know the big picture. You just tell him a bunch of little details, what does he know? You look at any area, whether it's art or music or cooking even, havdil. You'll see the good experts, they understand not just how to cook. They understand the seichel behind it. They understand the big picture behind it. Chassidus, there's no other better place than Chassidus to get the big picture of reality. Many times I tell sometimes people I speak to, I say, you're yeshiva, not Lubavitchers. May tell everybody you know the details well, but you go to any Lubavitch little boy or girl, they'll tell you why we're here in a second. We're here to bring Mashiach, we're here to make a dira b'tachtenim. So sometimes you have the big picture, you don't have the small picture. That's another problem. But many ways, if you have the big picture, it's much easier to get to the small picture than the other way around. And that's how Yesod Sheb Yesodis, because that's what Chassidus came to do. Talk about the Yesodis of Avis Yisrael, Avis Hashem, Yiras Hashem. In most yeshivas, those topics are not really taught. You learn more about the halachas, whether it's Hilchas Shabbos, or Hilchas Nida, or Hilchas the Tum V'Tara, whatever it may be. So the big picture versus the small picture. And then the three others that I said, root versus symptoms, I think that's pretty clear. That's something actually I hear many times from shluchim who tell me, people come to me for advice, and honestly, I don't know what to say. So I send them to a therapist, and I feel terrible. I said, I learned Chassidus all my life. I heard directives from the Rebbe, and I can't tell a couple how to deal with shalom bayis issue, or they're having an issue with their children, or they're having their own personal psychological issues. And even if, it's like a quick fix. Chassidus comes to teach us that what's exactly what the Rambam says, there's cheli haguf and there's cheli hanefesh. Cheli hanefesh doesn't mean mental illness. Cheli hanefesh means any psychological challenge. And there's a way to deal with the root, and there's a way to deal with the symptoms. Symptoms is, like they always say in the shalom bayis issue, there's three stories. There's his story, there's her story, and there's the true story. So it's never what you hear. Symptoms, people say, I don't like what my husband is doing, I don't like what my wife is doing, I don't like what my son or daughter are doing. Symptoms is like people who accuse and say the downfall of Crown Heights is Basil and the Erev. Those are symptoms, if anything, if they're a problem. They're symptoms, they're not the cause. If you see someone not sneezdik, you can rest assured that's a symptom, not a cause. Because why don't they feel they have to be sneezdik? Why don't they feel the dignity that others feel? So when you try to fight symptom if you try to solve problems with symptoms, you may get at best a Band-Aid that will last for Nestor Tanas Bizpurim. You deal with a root, you're dealing with a change of entire life, because you're solving the issue at the root of the problem. This is, in my opinion, quintessential Chassidus that teaches us how to look. Just to take my modim. You want an example of Eirei Sof Lifnei Tzimtzum? The Eibishter did not need a Seder Shtalshlus. He can create poof. Yesh ma'ai in the world, and you don't need Atzilus and Adbriya, not Yitzira and Asiya and Esesphiris and Parsois and Akudim, Nekudim, Ak, Teyu, you name it. All the levels Lifnei Tzimtzum. So why exactly do they exist? If God didn't need it, who needs it? Because the Eibishter wanted the world to be created in a way that we, human beings, in some logical, seichel way, can connect. If it would just be Kol Yochel the Eibishter, it would be very nice on God's terms. We would never connect. So there's Maimorim that talk about this at length, but almost every Maimer, at the end of the day, when you hear this concept, it's a very Sederzik, simple but basic concept, which says, like it says in Tanya, Eser Keiches HaNefesh, we have 10 faculties, Shenishtalshlu Mehen, from the Eser Sfiris of Yitzira, which Nishtalshlu from the Bria, Eser Sfiris of Yitzira, from Bria, from Eser Sfiris of Atzilus, all the way to Eser Sfiris of the higher levels, all the way to Eser Sfiris Hagnuzes, Lifnei HaTzimtzum. What are we saying? We're saying that everything that's a symptom has a root. And when you can trace the steps of, let's say, Chesed, of Asiyah, Gashmi, V'chumri, our Chesed, and say, what does this Chesed look like in Asiyah Ruchnis, or Yitzira, or in Bria, or in Atzilus, and higher, you essentially have yourself a model of a better Chesed in a higher level, the way it was meant to be, and then how it got distorted as it came down. Mayim Gashmim is rooted in Chesed Elyon. There it's a what they call an archetype. It's a conceptual thing, because Chesed doesn't look like water. When it comes with a physical body, it's water. Everything in existence, the first thing Chassidus teaches, you look at the world around us, has what? A Chayes Aliki within it. That Chayes Aliki has many dimensions all the way to the top. So if you want to understand the human being created B'Tselem Elikim, you need to understand what is the parallels between us and the Tselem Elikim that is within us. So if you see somebody behaving in an obnoxious and atrocious manner, so here's a Tselem Elikim that's distorted, how do we bring it back to what the Tselem Elikim is supposed to look like? And then when you look at Avram, Yitzchak, Yankov, and all the role models in Torah, you're getting an archetype of a healthier personality type, whether it's Chesed of Avram or Gvura of Yitzchak, and Teferes of Yaakov, and so on with Moshe and Aaron. I wish that someone had told this to us when we were teenagers. It would have been so fascinating, because everybody wants to know about ourselves. Here's who you are right now, shaped by your education, by your parents, by Elam Hazeh, and here's who you could be if you just go back to the root of what created you. So what is Eirei Sof Lifnei Tzimtzum at the end of the day? It's how God envisioned existence before existence happened. That's what it comes down to. You think the Eibishter needs an aid or a level? That's what Chassidus says. Shir Atzmei B'Keach. And then there's a level even higher than that. I'm not going to go now into the whole, all the levels and the dakas dika, but just as an example, Gan Seder Shtalsus, from beginning to end, is basically Elam Katan Zeh Adam. It's inside of us, and it's meant for us to be like a ladder where you climb from level to level to level. So when you learn in the Maimorim that the 4 dargis in Tefillah, Birchas HaShacher, Psukkah de Zimra, Shema, and Shmonesra, or however, sometimes it's Birchas Krishma, etc., are 4 rungs of the ladder that Yaakov dreamed, 4 rungs of Asiya, Yitzira, Bria, and Atzilus. Neshama shenesate b'taherihi, ata barasa, ata yetzarta, ata nefachta bi. You told that to a student in the ACs that's Masim, it's fascinating. Your soul is going on this journey all the time, down and back up. And it's up to you to elevate it to that level. So someone will say to you, what does a neshama look like on the Taheda level as opposed to, let's say, the Barasa level or the Yitzarta Nefachta bi? Okay, that's the work we have to spell it out. What does it look like in Asiya? What does it look like in Yitzira and Bria? But you can spell it out. If you want, I'll take it a step further. This is just one way of applying it or explaining it. At the end of the day, Atzilus, Bria, Yitzira, Asiya, these 4 levels, is, to put it in simple atheist, every creation of anything. If you want to create a business plan, or build a building, or create music, or write a book, there's always 4 steps. Always. Step number 1 is you have to have a vision. What's your vision? What's your unified vision of what you want to accomplish? What is this book going to convey? What is this painting going to project? What is the building's purpose? The next thing is you need to create an outline, a framework. Everything needs an outline. An outline is just general prakim. What are going to be the general chapters, the general teichem? Then you need to flesh it out into details. And then the final product is when you have the end result. There you have Atzilus Bri Yitzir Asiya in simple Asias. Atzilus is the vision. Everything is Be'elam Achdus there. It's all there. There's Chesed, there's Chochmah through Malchus, but it's all united in the vision of the Creator. But that's not Pel Mamish. Bria is an outline, Chemer B'leit Surah, or sometimes Efshari Samitzias, however Chassidus explains it. Yitzira is Kishmai Keinhu, Surah. You're giving it shape and form. And then you come to the end, you have a final product, there's the full dimensional product. You look at a building in any place where there's a construction site. You'll see these stages. There's a stage where you only see an outline. And you don't even know what it's going to be. You just see a foundation and some basic thing. Then you start seeing take shape, and then you see the end. Now, if you go to the blueprint, to the architect, you could also see the plan the way it was in so-called the Atzilus stage. Now, I know you'll say, 1 second, this is a very simplistic way of explaining it. Yeah, I'm specifically making simplistic. Obviously, Atzilus and Bri Yitzir Asiya has a lot more. When you say the Alter Rebbe is in Neshama Atzilus, doesn't just mean that he's like the blueprint. But think about it. What does it mean? It means he lives on the vision level. A Rebbe is a Neshama of Atzilus because he sees the vision of everything in existence, every given moment. People from Bri, Yitzir Asiya, may not. They see part of their picture. It's just an example. But this is where a big picture informs a small picture. As well as, I said, root and symptoms. That's really where I was going with that one. Okay. Then the next 2, relevance I spoke about. I think it's all about relevance at the end of the day. Relevant to me. Karvei lecha. You say, chanechel nar al pi darkei. What does that mean? It's not just chanechel nar al pi darkei. And the Rebbe, of course, explains what darkei means. What do you mean darkei? Is not derech hatera? And I remember Memches, the Rebbe spoke, what week was it? I think Sazirim Etzera. So the Rebbe said, second Mishnah, second Perek in Pirkei Avos. Ezu derech sheyover lemina odom. He says, Tiferes leiv, Tiferes leiseha. So I remember the Rebbe saying, I remember him like yelling loud, actually. What's far as shaila does? Ezu derech sheyover lemina odom. Since when do we ask our odom what he should choose? The derech is derech hatera v'amitzvus. What is this, up to what's nice for people? Everybody can choose whatever's Tiferes leiseha. And the Rebbe answered briefly that we already learned in Perek Rishon Meisha Kibbel Teira Misinai. So we know that it's Teira. But now the Mishnah is saying, how do you internalize it? And how do you make it Chanechel Darpi Darkei? The Mishnah is saying instead of Teira. Now that you know there's a Teira Nasa, now is the Nishma. How do you internalize it? And I remember the Rebbe saying then, Zog the Rebbe Emer. Zog the Rebbe. As you make it Tiferes Lei, in other words, to make sure it's personally beautiful, not just conceptually, not just what the Eibishter said, but also that we can relate to it. And finally, the empathy, emotional intelligence. This you could speak about forever. I think it's one of the most lacking things. You hear it again and again from, I don't know what your yeshiva experience was. The first of all, caring. Does anyone care? We remember when we were in yeshiva, some say people didn't care. I was once working in Sefer Lekutim, Stov Shalamet Ches. So we had permission to this. It was like considered the Seder by working in Sefer Lekutim. So we had office upstairs, over 770. And I worked one night. I don't know how much I worked, but I was up all night. And then I came down around 8 o'clock. And one of the mashpiyim, Rab Sholem Marozov, comes over to me, and I saw he's taking attendance, which itself was unique. And he says to me, "Deren mit der Shenish gesehen for 100,000 Jahr." So he called me by the wrong name even. He didn't even know who I was. He didn't see me for a year now. So I told him, because Deren Shenavek in Eretz Yisrael, Shliach, like in Lamed V'dayin, I think he went. Und wie heißt du? So I said, well, we'll meet again, and I'll let you know one day, My point was, he's a great guy, sweet guy. But the question is, does anyone care? Is there care? And, there's an expression, I don't know who coined it, that people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. You could be filled with knowledge, you could be the most brilliant person. One of the things you always hear about the Rebbe was not just he was brilliant, he cared. You stood in the Rebbe's presence, even if there's 1,000 other people, he looked at you as if nobody else was there. That simas lev, the care. What's the Evan Abechen of a Rebbe? Moshe Rabbeinu, Hoyereye, the care for that one sheep. You can't imagine how much that can go. That can overweigh all the knowledge in the world. Because someone sees you care. When someone cares about you, you feel like a certain, besides it gives you dignity, it also means your choices matter. People who feel no one cares about them, what do you think happens? They become less and less good in their own eyes, and it's very easy for them to fall and slip. And the second half of this is what's called emotional intelligence. We have a lot of brilliant intelligence. Women are blessed with more emotional intelligence than men, just that's for the record. But that doesn't mean we can't develop it. Emotional intelligence means you don't hide behind your mind in like a chess game or mind games where you're brilliant and you can always win every argument. Quintessential male trait. We're arguing, let's argue. We love to argue, and we love to who's going to win the debate. Emotional intelligence is the example that the Rebbe with Velvel Green, when he came to the Rebbe, and after a few years, so he was arguing with Rabbi Feller about evolution and this and that. Rabbi Feller said to him, write to the Rebbe, because he gave him the letter, the famous letter, and he said it's not enough. The letter is not for a professor like him. So he wrote to the Rebbe never answered him. Then 2 years later, whatever it was, he came to the Rebbe Yeshivas. By then he was already a Shemet Torah mitzvahs. The Yeshivas, at the end of the Yeshivas, the Rebbe says, and by the way, the letter you wrote to me, and the Rebbe went on to a whole scientific explanation which impressed him tremendously. So he says to the Rebbe, if you had such a great explanation, why'd you wait? Why didn't you answer? Because I thought you didn't have what to say, so you didn't answer. So the Rebbe said to him, because I sensed that if I had answered then, I may have won an argument, but I would have lost a chassid. This is called emotional intelligence. It means you don't have to always win the debate, win the battle. You want to win the war. And you have to think, sometimes restraint is important. You don't always have to do what's right. What's right, like the Medrash says. He asked Emes, should the world be created? Emes said, no, it's Molish Garim. Ela Molish Garim. He asked Chesed, Eibishter asked Chesed for sure. Because even if it's not completely Emes, this Chesed. So the Eibishter took Emes, threw it to the ground, the Medrash, and said, then Emes Meretz Titzmach, it will ultimately emerge once there's Chesed. But if you don't have Chesed, Emes does not really work. So you need both, obviously. We're not talking about Sheker Legamri, Rachmana litzlan, you need case by case. But that type of sensitivity and that type of emotional intelligence, understanding not just what's right, what it says. You see a Talmud, for example, who's struggling. So yeah, you could try maybe with tough words, and if it works, great. May not work. As the Rebbe says, always more suffix is better than lekula, because If you're too strong on someone, you can hurt them. If it's the worst is you could spoil them a bit. But you realize that sometimes it's not about getting them just to discipline them. It's about how you're going to get through to them that they'll appreciate it. And most importantly, you want to empower them, that they don't have to come to you. You're the discipliner. You want them to go away, that they will forever be different and level different. So that fund of emotional intelligence, which in reality, I could say, I have without hesitation, that I think a lot of Chassidus, the way it was taught, and I was around, and I think still today, is not taught with emotional intelligence, it's taught with intellectual intelligence. I have my theories why it's the way, but it is that fact. And that's why you produce a lot of maskilim, and people perhaps can talk and be mefalpel and kolmine sugis and chassidus and the deepest things. But if you ask them a question, can you tell me how that makes us more compassionate? They'll look at you like, I don't know what you're talking about. So I know people can tell you every darga lifnei tzimtzum, and tell you how it's negay and achdus Hashem, but if you come to them for a favor, they're too busy. That to me, when you see that, you start saying, 1 second, okay, very brilliant person, but like it's completely, there's what's called dissonance. There's no connection to the humanity of the person. And I think I don't have to elaborate on the problems with that, because you learn from that as well. Do you think students are just looking at how smart the person is? They're looking also what kind of person that is, how they behave, how they care, and so on. So that's why I don't think you can overstate this point. To me, it's like it lies at the heart of every good mechanech. If you're going to make an impact on anyone, they will always remember not what you taught, but how much you cared, and how sensitive you were, and how you related to them, and especially in situations that were controversial. And by the means, I just want to make sure you understand, I don't mean here a type of touchy-feely thing where we lose all our standards and everything goes. Obviously, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about something that you have clear values and standards, but there's a kindness involved, and it's not just the law is more important than the spirit of the law. No, that's not the case. It has to be the ruach, and if Chassidus didn't teach us that, then what did it teach us? Obviously, Yisrael in Tanya does not mean that everything goes, that everything a person does. Oh, no problem, your neshama is beautiful. That's not what he says there. He says that we don't judge neshamas, and no one knows which neshama is greater. And the approach of how you reach somebody is with ava. It doesn't say there that everything is acceptable. You can have very strong disagreements with people you love, your brothers and sisters, and you still love them with all your heart. And now let's talk. Forget it. Because you love them, that's why you want to help them be inspired to grow. So I think I covered, at least to some extent, some of the principles here. Since I don't know how much time we have left. I don't know what the schedule is here, whatever. But since we are all partners in crime here, I mean a good way. So maybe if you have any questions or comments, and by all means, I'm here to be of help. You know, I will just say this: I taught in some of the yeshivas. I taught mostly in Beis Rivka and little other places, but I never taught in a formal school. But I do teach all the time, so I know a lot about teaching, and I teach people who are actually not audiences that sign up and are forced to come to school because someone's paying their tuition. I have to teach people who can choose not to come next week, so it makes it a little more difficult. But I think a lot of what I've said here is also informed by some of that experience. And as I said, we are all humans, we all make our mistakes, but what we're trying to do is create the kivun, the approach that the Rabbeim gave us, both in their teachings and in their writings, and as well as, of course, in their own approach to things. So I didn't really go into like where I got all this from. You know, there's many stories with the Alter Rebbe, and I could share one or two if you like, about how when he was asked about how you learn Tanya. I'll just share one, just for example. I discovered it just a few years ago, and I was like blown away by it. And that I was blown away that no one ever told anybody. That in Tov Kuf Nun Zayin, right, the Alter Rebbe started publishing the manuscripts. Nun Vov, Nun Zayin. The Chassidim came back to the Alter Rebbe and said, we don't understand Tanya. The Frierdiker Rebbe brings this, the Sikha of, I believe, Shavuos, Pesach, Tov Shin Aleph. Pesach or Shavuos, I think it's Pesach. And the Frierdiker Rebbe says there, he says that the Alter Rebbe told them, Val Sahal Bezach, Tanya. When man will verstehen the halbe Zach, dann verstehen the zweite halb. What do you think is the zweite halb? Nigun, Nigine, a Nigun. That's what the Alter Rebbe says. Ad Kedei Kach, the Tzemach Tzedek, who had a chush Nigine from birth, worked hard at eliminating that chush, and he had charata once he heard that from the Alter Rebbe. You can imagine, even with him eliminating it, probably was a pretty nice chush as it was. So what does that mean? Does he mean learning Tanya with a niggin? Obviously not. The hergish, that you feel that you're not just learning words that are dry, even deep words. There's a niggin involved. There's what's niggin at the end of the day? Kol masalev. So right there, the Alter Rebbe says that. Now you could say it's some favor from the Sikha, but it's not. He said clearly that's the halb from Tanya. So to me, that's like, I wish someone told this to me 40 years ago. What am I discovered it just 5 years ago? I always had a sense that Tanya is more than just words. And Tanya is brilliant. And you could sit on it and be medayik in one word, Alter Rebbe's Ge'enis. And he didn't write it in an emotional way. He wrote it with all the brilliance and gain. That's the Derech HaTeireh. But you forget there's a heart in it. And he said the second half is Negina, just as one small example. So I try to present as best as I could here. You know, I'm sure I didn't cover everything, obviously. So maybe, let's open it up here. Let's hear what you guys have to say. If you have comments, questions, rebuttals. As you know, I take all questions without any taboos. Right? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so we started off talking about the Tmim and the letter, which is very interesting. I'm just wondering about the Hamed now, if Tim Tmim, do you, these days, what I mean, what is Tim Tmim? Is it the same caliber as it was then? Is it a standard? What is Tim Tmim that the Rebbe Shach needed? Or do you do what works with your crowd of Batel that come in and it's still
Yeah, I hear. I think, first of all, it's Teres Nitzchi. Whatever the Rebbe Rashab said then, it stands today. The only thing is, we have now also the Frierdiker Rebbe and the Rebbe who so-called added to it and directed it. I mean, if you look in Kuntres Eitz HaChaim, so there's a lot there about having Teda with Ava V'yira. I mean, I translate that in simple, in our language today, is not just Teda and davening, which of course still remains completely part of it, but Teda that isn't just ideas and abstract philosophies, but it comes down to Ava V'yira to the Eibishter and of course Ava to other people. So I think all the principles are there. The question is where the emphasis should be. At the end of the day, in Kuntres Eitz HaChaim he says it's not just Limud HaNigla, it's Limud Chassidus. Chassidus is the Neshama of that Isa, Ilona Dechaya, which is Eitz HaChaim, and not just Eitz Hadas. Because at the end of the day, Nigla talks about matters of the world, and Chassidus talks about the Eibishter. So it's infusing Teda with a God. I mentioned the story before with the Brisker story. So I think it all applies today. The only thing that you can say maybe is different is that the Rebbe did not make a condition that when you got on a shlichus, you have to be a gon and a baki and all of Nigla and Chassidus. Because the Rebbe did see the idea, first of all, pekuach nefesh, that we are dealing now with a real issue of assimilation. And secondly, the Rebbe felt, and this is how I understand it, that when you're a dedicated shliach, that itself is going to make you learn more and have more aveda and more ava v'yira through the kav of the askonis tziburis, so to speak. But Peil Mamish, we know, listen, a lot of shluchim today I know are feel frustrated, and some of them have actually acted on it. You have a lot more shiurim, shluchim learning with each other. There's still challenge because at the end of the day, a shliach is very busy raising money. But I think that Rebbe wanted, he says in a number of places that you can't really do hafotza properly on shlichus if you're not yourself a person who's learning. So I think some shlichim know that if you're connected to a constant learning, it makes you a better shliach. Others don't know it yet, but I think the kavanah is very similar. And it would need more discussion in detail, the distinctions and so on. Yeah. Huh? I hear you mean, for example, even clothing like that? Is that what you mean?
Clothing, in Oisius, in having things specifically with the Yiddish Sprache and being Shelo, certain Hanachis, which back in the day they were Shelo, but now Bachram have the setting with the family.
Yeah, I mean, I need to hear more detail because I don't remember saying exactly that, but huh? I'm not positive what you're saying is, it could be. I'm not saying that. I just need to hear more detail about it. I agree. Look, the fact of the matter is, I mean, every yeshiva should have standards. There's a dress code, I assume. There's certain behaviors, and that this is how it is. Just like you go into any place, you have to have standards. The question also is, once a student is, let's say, a little older, and you can't really hold up the standards for whatever reason. Like in 770, there's no one there that's going to control. But I don't think you're dealing with that age, right? Anybody here? You're dealing, I assume all of you are dealing with the Talmidim that are under, Kavyochel, under your control, right? Am I correct in saying that? What is the...
Maybe I always feel that I'm not controlled.
No, I mean to say, if you're dealing with 23-year-olds, it's very different than a 17-year-old. That's what I mean. Huh? Sift and up, but how high up? Zal. Look, let's say, I don't know what your attitude would be. Let's say a bocher comes in, you see that he's glitching zich, he's like slipping in dress or in other things. Yeah, but also case by case, because some people, this is a yeshiva, there has to be a certain standard. You can't have everybody coming in with jeans only, On the other hand,
Can I just make one quick announcement?
yeah.
We're going to serve lunch now. If anybody wants to eat, we're going to have another class at 2:30, but you're welcome to speak Rabbi Jacobson as long as he's ready to stay.
Yeah, I'm here. I'm here for a few more minutes. I'll talk. You could feel free to eat a sandwich while we're talking. Sure.
But I think you were talking about two separate things, or maybe connected to things. You're talking about taking it from the Haskalah, making it personal. I think a lot of the focus is on making it personal in an emotional way. And a lot of times you forget about the actual nitty-gritty, actual halacha on the ground, practical, which is what the Yeshivas is more focused on that. I mean, for example, tznius, practical, it isn't talking about inspiration for tznius, and that you have to be inspired, and you have to feel, and you have to, et cetera, without actually talking about the details that, you can't wear a neckline just past a certain thing, you can't do this and just past that, davening also, you can't daven without a jacket. You go to 770 now, half the place is davening without a jacket. It's an actual problem that has to be addressed. And I think that as much as it's important to bring the Haskalah down to the Rebbes, there's sometimes it's much practical.
Look, as I said,
You gotta tell them. This is no good. This is the problem.
I agree. I said every school, every yeshiva has a dress code or other certain guidelines, that you have to uphold because there's other students as well. You got totally agreed. The question is, let's say there's a student that's starting to break some of those rules. What do you do? How do you address it? Do you just go home and change? Or do you have another way to deal with it? That's where it gets... in a chanami, but let's say that doesn't work. I mean, obviously, we can't go through every scenario, but it's not a question. I make it very clear. Anything said here, even in the deepest Avis Yisrael, I heard once they were sitting in Eretz Yisrael, the Hanhola of Teres Emes maybe. So Zelig Feldman, and then there was Sholem Feldman, they were sitting. They were dealing with a few Bochrim that were really not coming to Seder, and they were like, they saw they were off on their own thing. So one of the two Hanholas said, enough is enough, we have to throw them out. And I heard, it was just a very moving moment, so I think it was Zelig or Sholem Feldman, one of them said, Ab Sefort Neshamos. This one's a Neshamos. In other words, you can't just ignore that. So that's a big challenge always. Sometimes you say a bad apple is going to make other apples. It's going to affect others. Practically, to be very honest, I don't think one size fits all. That's case by case,
I live in Adetown. I come to Carmine. So just brought in a woman from Cincinnati. She's a Yeshivas. She comes over here. My wife took her around Carmine, and she started asking questions. Why is this woman, wearing a shekel, but she's not
with all. So what are you suggesting, that we should stop loving?
No, I'm suggesting that we put all the focus on the loving, and then we give lip service to the fact that, and we have to also have a standard, as opposed to.
Look, if you have a formula that works, I'm sure everybody would want to hear it.
Okay, that's I'm saying.
No, it's very nice to be critical, and you say, I guess for a while, it's very nice to be critical, but if you don't have an alternative, do you have a solution?
That's the solution.
What do you have a solution, or are you suggesting?
Solutions, do I have a solution?
Yeah, of course. You can't come suddenly and just say critique, and unless you have a solution.
I'm not telling you something you don't know.
So I'm asking you a question. Do you have a suggestion, or are you just here to point out something we all know?
I'm saying so.
I asked you a question. Why don't you answer my question? Yes.
The suggestion is to talk about those things throughout these things.
Now, what do you do? You're talking about adults who are walking the streets. They're not under your control anymore. What are you going to do?
Adults work once children.
So tell me. So how do you? That's exactly. So how are you going to be mechanech them in a way that when they grow into adults, they would live up to the standards we expect?
You have to tell them that nobody has to do that that it's important, that it's not secondary.
And one second, you think that? Do you think the yeshivas? I grew up in yeshiva system. They constantly said that, and it didn't work. Frankly, it worked with some. It didn't work with everybody. I'm not saying some definitely live up to that, and some don't. So I don't know if it's just saying it is going to make a difference. I personally think I disagree with you for this reason. That's why I'm sitting here, standing here. Because I think what was lacking was not telling people to wear a jacket. I was told this many times. It's explaining to them that they should be in a state where they will understand themselves that wearing a jacket is the standard. You could tell people rules all day. For 5 years old, it works. When it's 15 years old, you still can punish them if they don't live up to it, but you're not inspiring them. So my question would be, if a bacher came to you and said to me, can you tell me why do we wear a jacket? What would you say? I'm saying, so what would you say? A bacher comes to you, I don't know why I should wear a jacket. Tell me, why is there a reason I should wear a jacket? Okay, but can you tell me the logic of the halach? It's a hot day, why should I wear a jacket? And you feel the answer you just told me is going to say, he's going to say, the rabbi told me it's halacha. Now I know it. From now on, I'm going to wear a jacket. Is that what you think? Halavai. So listen, let me put it this way. The proof is in the pudding. You're a mechanech, and if the results of your talmidim is coming out great, I think people should emulate what you're suggesting. I have no problem with that. But to me, it's always what you look at the results. Fine. I don't think you'll have excellent results with everybody. I think with a few, maybe. I think when it comes to tznius issues, most people don't understand what the word dignity is, and they see it as just a bunch of laws. And I think most of the smart people, when you tell them laws that says in Shulchan Aruch Hazeh, Shulchan Aruch Hahin, they don't understand the spirit of it. And if you don't understand the spirit, it becomes very hard to follow the technicalities. And most know the halachas, but don't see the, and they see dogmatic approaches. Look, I mean, listen. You're a young man. I'm a little more. I think I have a little more experience. I think that many people know, but it's irrelevant to them. Another thing, when people preach to people and tell them, I'll tell you what the halacha is, they come away feeling, this person is condescending, dogmatic, and doesn't know how to speak like a mensch. And I disagree with you that you think. Listen. I think the Ava is more that's missing than the halacha, to be very honest. Why we felt what? I didn't hear the end of the sentence. Why we felt what? When you say we, you're talking about yourself or somebody else? One second. First of all, a statement, we fell low, I don't think that Rebbe would make someone make such a statement. This, we fell low, is some type of kitrug al kol Yisrael. So what do you mean? Were you referring to the people that walk not tzniusdik in Crown Heights? Is that what you're referring to? I have a few thoughts. I'll tell you my theories on it. I think, first of all, some of the people teaching it to us, we don't respect. So, you get an idea that comes from people who you sometimes see hypocritical or disconnected, or you find out suddenly they're Balei Machlekes or something like that.
Why are they Balei Machlekes?
Okay, but let's talk about the younger. That's number one. I think that there's learning, as I said here at length. People know the guf of Chassidus, but not the Neshamos sometimes. Like, let's take the Rebbe. We're after Gimel Tammuz now. So how many young people relate to the Rebbe in a personal way? Some will tell you, I don't relate personally, but I'm being taught and trained to relate. This I hear from many, many young people tell me all the time, that it's like a cultural thing. Just like some communities have a green flag, some nations, some people have a blue flag, some people have a red flag. So there's this like a cultural thing of a Chabad culture that there's a Rebbe and there's certain standards, and they don't necessarily relate it personally. They just say, I grew up in this culture. And I'm being told things that I don't necessarily relate to. You know what? Some of them I will do, some I won't do. I think there's a big issue like that. And I think there's a lot of factors that contribute to it. You asked the question about the teachers themselves. Look, can you point to me, how many people can you tell me that are Chassidish She'idin through Aveda, not through birth, meaning not the way they're wired, and they grew up in a community like that they push it arbeit nach sich day to day? This is a question I've been asked by quite a few Talmidim.
Myself, I learned, and I teach Tanya, and I teach Moed Shalom, and I don't have Moed Shalom.
You know what?
I teach Moed Shalom, and I myself many times don't have.
You're not the only one. Welcome to the club.
So where am I missing? What component am I missing?
First of all, just remember, the same Tanya says there's also a very strong Nefesh Habamis. That's very strong. And if Me'ach Shalta Lev was so easy, we would have Mashiach here already. We all have issues. I think when I try to teach it, I try to give examples to students and say, here's a Me'ach Shalta Lev that you can try out right now, and let's see if it works. Tafasta merubelei tafasta. If you're going to go after the biggest Yetzer Hara Taivas, it's probably going to be hard. But you can choose areas where Me'ach Shalta Lev works. And if you can get people trained into that mode, then you can go and say, okay, now let's work on something a little harder. Like you train for a marathon. You do 1 mile first, and then 2 miles, and then 3 miles. So I would go with that approach. And I think with yourself as well, with all of us, to use Me'ach Shalta Lev in areas which is a little easier, and then try to apply it to things that are a little harder. Take the easy things first. So that way it makes it more accessible. Because if you tell somebody in Shiva, listen, Me'ach Shalta, every time you have a machshava zora, just push it away, b'shtei yadayim, and everything he says in Tanya there. And the guy will say, you know what, I tried, it doesn't work. And that's it. They're not going to try it again. But if you tell them, let's use Me'ach Shalta Lev, not necessarily on the biggest machshava zora. Let's talk about something a little easier to focus on. Right now we're going to go for an hour on Mivtzoyim. And on Mivtzoyim, the expectation is you're going to be dealing with people, you're going to learn with people, you'll teach people. During that hour, you can say you had Me'ach Shalta Lev because you were involved in something very positive. So now, let's see, can we then bring it and apply it to other areas of life? To me, that would be the wise way to make it, because you want to show them it's doable. If somebody feels I can't run a mile, they're not going to run 20 miles. You're going to expect the highest levels of Aveda from somebody. Look, he says in the Kuntis Eitz Chaim, you can't reach. No, actually not there. It's a different place. I'm sorry. You can't reach Tshuva Law if you don't have Tshuva Tato. You need to have stages. That's how I would approach that, with self personally and also with others. What are we saying? Yeah, right. Exactly. And you could teach people. Me'ach Shalta Lev is an art. It's B'tevet Dose and everything. But it's still an art that you need to master, which means you need to work on it. It could be a natural instinct, but you still have to work on it. I always tell people examples. I say, someone tells me I'm what do they call it? At AD, attention deficit disorder, ADD. So I met a guy. He told me he's ADD. He doesn't have any attention. So I said to him, "Where were you last Saturday night?" Not one, a secular guy. He says, "I spent all night in a casino." I said, "All night? Yeah, 7-8 hours playing blackjack or whatever." I said, "What happened to your ADD?" He says, "I like doing that." Oh, I said, suddenly when you like doing something, ADD disappears, which is true, by the way. You really like something, you find a way to do it. So you have to find things that will make somebody committed to it. That's how I would approach it. That makes it easier. Now, if you can get somebody, a Kabbalas El Bocher, to work on himself in davening and Berchad Lev in the most direct way, by all means. I'm not negating going for top level, but you're going to need the type of Bocher that's shaykh to that. Not everyone is going to be shaykh to that. Okay, so with all respect, I don't think the information is the issue so much as I think the way it's conveyed. That's my experience. Now, some people that they need information, so as I said, the proof is in the pudding. If you convey the information and it works, great. I'll be the first to support that. I have no issue with that. Listen, we're going in circles. You feel that way. I don't feel that way. Many more than you think. Look, you're very, listen, you're very stuck in your position. You have to realize there's more complex than you think it is. It's not just facts, telling people facts. I don't know how big, because I don't know how many studies you've done to be able to prove that. In your little circle, maybe. So as I said to you, if it works, it works. I think it's much more. I know people who know all the facts and they don't abide by them the way you think. Because to them it doesn't matter too much. They don't really care. They don't care about these halachas. You ever think of that? No, I've just told you. Can you imagine there's some people that do know and they don't care? Or that's out of your scope? Why don't they care? So that's a big factor. That's a big factor, to care. Those that don't know, teach them. With all respect, I don't think you're right. I think go to 5 people not wearing a jacket and ask them if they know the halacha, and they'll tell you that most likely they do. And it doesn't matter to them so much. Are there some that don't know? Yes, there are some that don't know. Huh? Yeah. Gedalim should be it, yeah. Yeah. My taich of Gedalim should be it. I always wondered why the Alter Rebbe wrote Gedalim. It's Hamad Neloshin, like it should say, Rabbonim, Mashpim, you don't see often Gedalim, And also sounds like, where the Gedalim B'chla? Who are the Gedalim Yisrael? So I thought, this is my own Hashara, Yashleim B'derech Efshek, that in the Rebbe, Alter Rebbe's every word is b'diyuk. Halacha, a godel is so emotionally mature. What's the difference in a godel and a cotton? It's not just emotional maturity. That I think the Alter Rebbe was saying to go to the emotionally mature people in the Be'ir. That's my taich. Not just lomdim. Anyway, that's the kids. There's cheresh sheitev v'cotton is a godel. Yeah. How do you what? First of all, how do you know if it's been on the Malkim? How do you know he's doing them? Like what? Not davening? Breaking Shabbos. Why is it different than Benov L'Chaveri? I'm not sure. Why is it different than Benov? Listen, I'm not sure. What's your first name? Your style, I can tell you for sure, would not necessarily be makar if people would be merachik them. You're very aggressive, and you're very adamant. And that's between you and me. I'm saying it respectfully. That will not work in most cases, in my opinion, with Talmidim. You're very adamant. As if like, it's the only way, you got to figure it out. It's, if they knew the halachas, everything will be solved. That's what you're saying. It's not lav dafka. There's other people. You got to hear other opinions. I'm just... Beautiful. So, but it doesn't sound like Levi Yitzchak Barditchevet to me. Okay. And I think your ideas are critical. Absolutely. That's part of learning. No one suggested no ideas. But ideas, I think, without the ruach, you're going to not get through everything that you want to get through. There's a ruach to everything. There's a reason we wear a jacket. It's not stam to put on a jacket. There's a reason. And you know, when people start, I have a guy that's decided to take off his yarmulke. He lives in this community. So I'm friendly with him. I said, why'd you make this decision? He says, I found out. You know, he was a good bocher when he was in yeshiva, and he knows his stuff. He says, a yarmulke, it's not even a tarkona for Nabon. It's a minig Yisrael. So I say, good, but certain minhagim become a symbol and something strong. He says, yeah, but if you want to strike a halacha, it's a shvacha halacha. So sometimes ideas can also cause that problem the other way around. He doesn't feel the need for Yiras Shamayim. That's a thing. So him a yarmulke, no, mehechetes. Huh? No. That's one opinion. It's not all opinions like that. It's not so, Baka. Okay, there you go. No, I disagree with you because there are many big choshev rabbanim that state otherwise. That what you just said. You quoted the Alter Rebbe. There's other poskim. You don't know there's other poskim? I mean, if you're talking lumdus, let's talk lumdus. There's other poskim. You aware of that? Huh? What's the difference? But my point is, don't just say, you're saying he doesn't know lumdus. Maybe he knows the Alter Rebbe. He also knows other opinions. You forgot about that? That's possible too. You're judging him now. How do you know? Maybe because he doesn't. The idea by him is he knows, and he knows that's opinion. There's other opinions. You know. That's why I'm telling you that I don't think it's the idea always. That's my point.
I didn't say it's the idea always. That's my point. I didn't say it's the idea always. I'm saying that there's an additional problem that there's a lack of ideas. That's all I said.
Okay. So it's fine. Let's move to the next stuff. Go ahead. You were going to ask something. And I got to leave in 5 minutes. I'll leave. Oh.
They're not affecting all the doctors and what they're doing, but you know that they're touching every Shabbos.
And why is it different than Benon L'Chaveri? Why is Benon L'Chaveri better? I mean, different, in your opinion?
They're not around the apple affecting other doctors. It's with sinner. They do their thing, and it's like, oh.
Look, if a person doesn't have a problem Benon L'Mokim, I think you have to again go to the root of it. You know, does he have a Eibishter in his life? Is there any area that is there a line he would not cross? I would like to look for, you know, when I meet a guy like that, I would try to find out what his relationship with Eibishter is. So maybe it could be lax in certain things. Is there other areas that he does connect? If it's all missing, then yeah, I think a guy like that needs a very good inspiration into God. Maybe he got to disconnect. I'm not the one that writes the laws about this matter. If I was on Anhola, I would look at other factors with this guy. If is he causing problems to other students? Is it his own private thing? You have to look at the whole picture. You know, throwing someone out is a very big statement. It could have irreversible consequences. So you got to look at a whole picture before you throw out a person from a yeshiva, whatever reason it may be, because you can change a person's life with that. So I would never take the achrayus myself. You talk to a few people, you look at the whole picture of this individual, and then see what are the reasons, the pros and the cons. And maybe there's some in-between solutions, you know. It's also not so black and white. You know, this is debates that have been going on for years about what would be the causes to throw a bocher out of yeshiva. You know, what would be the causes? Does anyone wrote the rules that are, we know exactly what the rules are? I think that people struggle with it. Because today especially, those that have been thrown out, what happened afterwards? What happened to them? Did it help? Did it not help? Not so pashut. I would not stand here and give you black and white rules on this matter. I would say that each case has to be looked at individually. I don't think there's just you have to really see what the circumstances are. Also, if you're really a caring mechanech, maybe a different yeshiva would work better for that person, and maybe it doesn't have to be thrown out. Maybe you find a way to transition that student to a better environment that will work better for them. Because if you're just throwing out, then you're just protecting your own interests. You also, the welfare of the bocher is important, and maybe that's a good idea sometimes to look at other options. Sometimes there's a perfect environment or more lax environment. It's really case by case. I don't think you're going to find a rule, because it's serious business. This,
Can I go back to what you started originally? You said Chassidus has guidance, direction for everything. We spent the last 2 years talking about mental health and a whole range of different topics. Just when would you say Chassidus has the answer to everything? Therapy, guidance, what's your just, I guess, every minute you have left?
yeah, I mean, I've talked about this a number of times. I did some research. There's no again black and white. I wrote a few articles on this topic, because here's the question really: things that are clinical, medical conditions, like anything, like physical related or mental, even mental health. Let's say a person's diagnosed with bipolar or schizophrenia or clinical depression. So they're nit neshus l'reifel l'rapis. That's clear. Okay, no. I'm just want to divide areas that are Yoni Avedis Hashem. So there we have mashpiim and rabbonim, selach harav. The question comes when it's something like, let's say, a bocher is a shtickle depressed, but it's not clinical depression necessarily, like where he may need medication or a real doctor, or a person is dealing with anger or shalom bias issues. Let's talk about things like that. So there, my understanding at least, is that Chassidus does have plenty to say. You need to have a competent, like the Alter Rebbe says, Gedalim Shavir, who can know how to apply the Chassidus. And sometimes they can work closely with a professional therapist to deal with things that maybe is out of their scope. That sometimes a therapist that also respects, obviously, Yiddish Shemayim is and Yiddishkeit. So I would, again, it's case by case, but I think in those in-between areas, halavai, we would have enough mashpim that are like soul doctors that could really be very good, like what it says in Chumash, hachochem asher biyamecha, the kohen asher biyamecha. That you have somebody who is a type of understands ruchnisdik and psychological issues and can give good chassidish advice. There are some people who do that, professionally even, chassidish mishpiyim, so to speak. But we need a lot more, and there's still a gap. There are people, for example, let's say dealing with sex abuse, that we don't really have competent chassidish mashpiyim for that. So they go to certain therapists that chassidish guys have found. They may not be even frum, but they're very big professionals, because that could be already borderline. I'm saying clinical. Hey, how are you? Borderline. That's already needs a bigger professional. But I think what you have to do is talk to the few people that are really mumchim in this, and they know where the balance is. There are gray areas, let's put it that way. That's what it comes down to. They're more black and white, and they're more gray.
I hear a lot of cynicism against this whole idea that Tanya has everything.
I wouldn't just make a statement, Tanya has everything. The Alter Rebbe says that's all the eitzes. The question is, even if it has everything, do we have people who know how to take it out of Tanya? That's the shayla. So sometimes, you know what? I've learned some things from professionals that are not Tanya-based, and then I realized that in Tanya it says it there. So I think working together is not a problem to have different strengths from different people. It's like two different type of professionals. Anyway, my good colleague here and friend is Menachem is going to take it from here, right? It was great talking to you guys. Aslach Rabbe, you're doing the most important work, shaping lives of the future that will determine what the next generation is going to look like. And I hope you do a better job than the previous generation did. That's the work. Call to of everybody. Aslach Rabbe. And aksiv chsimeteva. We can say that after Tu B'Av, right? Begashmis and Beruchnis. That's great. Thank you.